Thank you for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We are committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, regulatory actions, and political maneuvers in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact your freedoms.
Please support the State of Freedom by becoming a monthly supporter or member of the Warrior Circle, or by advertising your business, your nonprofit, or your event with us. Go to freedomstate.us. We are bypassing the mainstream media cartel and the establishment political parties in Louisiana and coming directly to you, spreading the uncensored voice of freedom across Louisiana and beyond. Tigerland Properties, these are licensed professional realtors in Louisiana, commercial, residential, investments, whatever you choose to do. These people, whether you're buying, whether you're selling, whether you want to invest, these people are the best in the business. They really are. Tigerland Properties, mainly they work in the Boot area of Louisiana, down in South Louisiana, but truly you could not be in better hands if you're buying or selling commercial, residential, or investing than Tigerland Properties. I encourage you to call them 225-320-3004. You'll want to make sure you're in good hands with commercial, residential, real estate, or investment, and they are the best.
Three fights in the last 5 years that all center around one constitutional question. Should the government be allowed to use race to decide your political representation? First, the state was accused of diluting black voting power. Then it drew a new congressional map, specifically creating another majority black district, and got sued for racial gerrymandering. The Supreme Court said that map was unconstitutional. Now the fight has moved to Louisiana's judicial districts. So what happens next? Does Louisiana finally embrace equality before the law, regardless of race? Or will the state buckle under pressure and name-calling again? Today, we're joined by Paul Hurd, lead attorney in the Callais case, to find out what Callais really means and whether Louisiana is finally ready to fight for the Constitution. 3 fights, 1 question, and this time there's nowhere left to hide. Let's bring forward our friend, Paul Hurd. Oh, before we do, I should probably finish my little introduction here. This is the State of Freedom. Good morning, folks. It's Thursday. We're hanging on. We're hanging in there. It's 10 a.m. Central on Thursday, August 27th. I'm Danielle Walker, and I'm joined by my dear friend and co-host, the Watchdog in Chief, with yet another pair of glasses today. And new glasses, new story.
Reveling in abundance over here, Danielle.
We're coming to y'all live on Voice of the People USA TV and radio network on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook, allegedly, although I have an alert here saying that 1 or more platforms dropped. I just can't tell which one it is. So if y'all know which one it is, somebody chat it in and let us know. Please take a minute, hit the thumbs up wherever you're watching, and you can catch us later on any of our audio-only podcast platforms. Now we can bring forward Paul, who is a new contributor to the State of Freedom Substack. Welcome, Paul. Thanks for coming.
Great to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Well, it's always great to have you. Why don't I start out with the scripture this morning before we get into the juicy stuff that's going on with districting being back in the head. Well, not really that much in the headlines, but it is. It's moving in the courts, it seems. Let me see. So today's scripture is 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. Verses 4 through 8, and it says, In fact, when we were with you, we forewarned you, suffering and persecution is coming, and so it has happened, as you well know. For this reason, when I could endure it no longer, I sent our brother to find out if your faith was still strong. And that's to say, not that he couldn't endure the persecution any longer. He couldn't endure knowing if the church at Thessalonica's faith was still strong. He wanted to know how think this is Paul wanting to know how they were doing. He said, "For I was concerned that the tempter had somehow enticed you, and our labor would have been in vain. But now Timothy has just returned to us and brought us the terrific news of your faith and love. He informed us that you still hold us dear in your hearts, and that you long to see us as much as we long to see you. So, our dear brothers and sisters, in the midst of all our distress and difficulties, your steadfastness of faith has greatly encouraged our hearts. We feel alive again as long as we know that you are standing firm in the Lord." And Jesus told the disciples, and in turn told us, that his true disciples can expect persecution. In John 15:19, he says, "If you were to give your allegiance to the world, they would love and welcome you as one of their own. But because you won't align yourself with the values of this world, they will hate you. I have chosen you and taken you out of the world to be mine. This is Danielle speaking now, I don't want to be found aligning my values with the world. The values of the world had my life headed straight to hell until Jesus rescued me. So why would I be bullied, intimidated, or worried about what that world thinks? And why would I want to blend in with it? The choice to stand firm in the Lord and move forward at his direction, as are most things in the spiritual realm, it's very simple, but it's not necessarily easy. But it's the only choice that my conscience can bear. And I'll speak over you the encouragement that Jesus spoke to his disciples before he went to the cross. He said to them, "Everything I've taught you is so that the peace which is in me will be in you, and will give you great confidence as you rest in me. For in this unbelieving world you will experience trouble and sorrows, but you must be courageous, for I have conquered the world."
For I have conquered the world, I have conquered all. And though you may find troubles and difficulties along the way, I have dominion, right, Danielle?
Yeah.
Jesus has dominion over heaven and earth, and we can go about our work knowing that, but not laboring under any illusion that there will not be slings and arrows that we have to endure and walk through by God's grace. And that is a powerful, powerful message today. The life of a Christian, Danielle, is not an easy life, but it is a life that rewards perseverance and rewards endurance beyond our wildest imagination. I love that scripture today. Thank you for sharing that. And speaking of someone who has endured some slings and arrows in the legal profession, while he has fought for the rule of law for 40 or 50 years now, I'm not exactly sure which, but a real titan, a titan of the rule of law, particularly as it pertains to redistricting in the state of Louisiana. It's really because of Paul Hurd that we have, at this point, achieved some level of fidelity to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution that specifically says we should not be dividing up each other based upon our race. We're all Americans, and we all have much in common because of the Constitution that governs us all, that transcend any sort of racial differences. And I really think that that's the operative principle of Paul's fight in redistricting. But there is no one who I feel more privileged to have on the State of Freedom than the one and only, the legendary Paul Hurd. Paul, thank you for being with us today, sir.
Chris, that's awfully nice. I'm glad to be here. We've been doing this attempt to basically eliminate racial preferences in elections, where we're allocating power based on arbitrary racial designations instead of an honest voter universe that would elect its representatives. And we have made great progress, and Callais may be a cherry on top of our ultimate colorblind society being implemented by the U.S. Supreme Court. And I'm glad to have participated in that. I do believe I won the first racial gerrymandering case in the United States on the merits in 1995. And I won the first one, and this may be the culmination of the racial gerrymandering jurisprudence before the U.S. Supreme Court as it relates to legislatures. And now we're going to move into the judiciary. The problem we've got in the judiciary is back in 1985, probably at the apex of the idea of racial allocation of power. Governor Edwards, our infamous Governor Edwards, and our infamous Attorney General Richard Ayoub surrendered in federal court and agreed to racially divide our voters under the pretext of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2. And the simple fact is that those racially specifically defined electoral districts have existed for 30 years. And now there is nothing clearer from Callais, from the Supreme Court, that we are not going to be able to justify racial segregation of voters under the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
They have made it clear that that is not, except under an extraordinarily narrow, intentional, present racial discrimination by the state actor. But for that kind of intentional racial discrimination, the allocation of political power in election districts by race is unconstitutional. And this is what's important under the judgeships. It's unconstitutional because it violates the 14th Amendment that says thou shalt, that people get treated equally under the law without regard to race, color, national origin. But the 15th, this is what's critical about our judicial elections. Our 15th Amendment also says thou shalt not be denied the right to vote, specifically, based upon race. What we've got in our judicial elections right now in Louisiana, in all of the large judicial districts, all your major cities and metropolitan areas, big suburban areas, have racially defined districts where if you're, let's say, I'll take Ouachita Parish, we're the 4th judicial district. You'll hear me say JDC, that's a judicial district court. We have 2 parishes. We're 70% white, 30% minority. 70% of the judges are elected from a white district, and 30% of our district judges are elected from a black district. Notice this, the white voters don't get to vote for the other 4 judges because of race. The 8 white judges elected from the white district, the black voter does not get to vote for those people because of their race.
Even if they live in the white districts, Paul?
No, if they're in the white district, they do. But the ones that are in the black district, because you are in the black district because of your race,
I see.
and because you're in the black district, you can't vote for the other group. Each group is being denied the right to vote because of
Such a great point. That's such a great point, Paul, that you made. Because so essentially, what you're saying here is that this scheme violates equal protection not only because of who it includes, but because of who it excludes.
Because it's built on the racial exclusion of voters.
Yes, yes.
That's really what it's saying is if you're a black in Ouachita, if you're in the black community and you live in that district, you're denied the right to vote for 2/3 of your district judges because you're black.
Such an excellent point. And yet you have Paul
so
here.
what's simply going to have to, if you'll just say it out loud, you know it's unconstitutional. And the problem becomes, what is the next one? If Louisiana doesn't take this up, it needs to either in a special session or in the coming 2027 legislative session. If they don't take it up, then what happens is political players will pick the time and the court where they want to file the lawsuit to either maintain their racial districts or to set them aside. What we need to do is Louisiana's voters, Louisiana's legislature needs to take the bull by the horns and create our new a new fair election system for our judges, because this bonfire's on fire. This system will not be sustained. The question
Exactly.
is, what is our remedy?
What's the remedy? Speaking of lawsuits, Paul, 3 black district judges, I believe, right here in Baton Rouge,
Correct.
are right now suing to keep the race-based subdistricts that protect their own seats. I think part of it, well, they're relying significantly on the Voting Rights Act, which, as you, because of your efforts, was absolutely
Let's just say clarified.
clarified. Yes,
It's as if mama said, don't eat cookies, don't eat cookies. The Supreme Court said, don't racial gerrymander, don't racial. Golly gee, guys, in Callais, I really mean it, don't racially gerrymander.
Yes.
And now they're trying to procedurally get a way to preserve their race-based districts in Baton Rouge.
Relying on the Voting Rights Act, which, because of your
And
efforts,
the surrender that occurred 40 years ago based upon voting patterns 40 years ago. Everything in what they've done for our listeners. Clark is we hear about each of these cases by their name. The Clark litigation is the litigation where Governor Edwards and IU surrendered and agreed to race-based districting in 85.
Clark v. Edwards, right? Clark v. Edwards, Paul. As you know, that's what these judges who are suing are clinging to. But Callais, it seems to me, provides the shield and the weaponry to finally throw out a 30-year federal mandate.
Well, that's exactly right. You cannot order a remedy that is not under Callais unless it's a race-based remedy that addresses current specific racial discrimination by a state actor. And you have none of that in the methodology that was used in Clark 30 or 40 years ago. And so what we're doing, what's going to have to happen is, if you read Callais, for example, one of the criteria that Judge Alito, who wrote the opinion, says one reason the past application of Voting Rights Act is not relevant today, or presumptively correct today, is that we have political parties where the difference between voting patterns are not racial discrimination, they're political discrimination. And the federal and state constitutions, our federalism establishment, gives the states the right to establish how we elect judges or choose judges. Texas chooses how they elect or they appoint. Each state, by federalism, has the authority. That's critical. There's a case called RUCO, R-U-C-H-O, and the Supreme Court has, since Clark, said if it's a political structure, the state has the authority, and federal courts do not have authority to interfere with those choices absent proof of current specific racial racial discrimination.
Yes.
So it's over. And one of the last things that Alito said was, when we're now analyzing whether or not discrimination is occurring, if you read all of the Section 2 cases since the 80s, up to now. One of the issues that it always arises is our obviously abysmal, embarrassing, disgusting racial discrimination that occurred in America under Jim Crow, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But what's happened is we have gracefully changed. We love one another, we live with one another, we go to school with one another, we marry one another. Race is not the institutionalized burden imposed by the system. And Alito says if it's not current, that history does not give rise to an allocation of a benefit to an unspecified person. If you are discriminated against, you get you can have a racial remedy. But the history means little compared to the issue under the Constitution is, are you being discriminated against today? Yeah, in the system currently. And again, you go back to Clark, it's 40 years old. It's like going back and saying, look, Plessy v. Ferguson said segregation was fair. In the I think it was in the 40s, 30s. It's as if saying, well, Louisiana discriminated in the 30s, so we're going to segregate today. It's laughable once you say it out loud. And I'm hoping that the Clark case stays closed. That's where it should stay, because it's yesterday's problem, not today's. So anyway, that's why I bring it up now.
Well, I love what you're saying because it really does bring us back to the founding of our country, right? Where this whole experiment is built on ideas, and people get to choose who represents them based on their ideas and not anything else. And I think that's what we're finally moving slowly but surely back to, is the ability to choose the people who represent us based on ideas and not on external factors. And I think increasingly, from my perspective, not on the label they wear on their shirt, whether that's D or R, because those lines have become very, very blurry in recent days as well. Question for you, Paul. On you mentioned that the Voting Rights Act and Alito's opinion in the Callais case says you cannot use race to do districting. Now, does Louisiana have the authority to use race in any of its state level districting? And I'll give you my thinking on this. I was thinking about, there's been a lot of talk lately about President Trump and the fact that he would like to see paper ballots only in our elections going forward. And if he were to do some kind of executive action, or even if the Congress were to move on that, it would really only technically impact federal elections. Now, it may bleed into state level elections depending on what the states choose to do, but there could be an argument to say that there may be one method of voting that the feds can dictate, which would be paper ballots, and one method of voting which the state selects for itself, which might still be machines. So with that kind of framework, I was wondering, does that mean that we can not racially gerrymander the federal districts, but there could still be some use of racial gerrymandering at the state level?
No, that's a good question. Here's constitutionally the difference. Under how federal elections are established, the federal Constitution says that the feds will set time and place and methods, and otherwise the states have authority to set up, and we're not talking about their elections. They obviously have the authority to set up their elections and the particular details. But as to even the federal election, while it looks like the federal government hands the power to the states, there is the catch-all at the end of the election provision in the U.S. Constitution that says that the feds basically have overriding power to standardize federal elections throughout the nation. And so when we talk about how to do those federal elections, there's a lot more power. The fight right now over the paper ballots has to do with whether the president has the authority or whether he needs a congressional act. It's the question of executive authority under existing statutes, or do they need a new statute for him to impose that on the state? At the state level, the state can do whatever it wants.
Right.
As long as it doesn't have the intentionally, objectively discriminate and have a negative effect based on race. And so the ballot is not going to be a problem. The Callais methodology, the concern now, the 15th Amendment does come into play. What I think is clear is I cannot say Louisiana has, we have 6 congressmen. All right, we have 1/3 minority vote. I'm generalizing. Yeah. So therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to have 4 congressmen in column A and 2 in column B. And if you're black, you vote in column B. If you're white, you vote in column A, so that the whites elect these and the blacks elect these. That's crazy, right?
Yes.
All right. That's what racial subdistricts do. That's exactly what they're designed intentionally to do. It's indefensible. And so the question, we've got a constitutional bonfire. Now the question is, how do we constitutionalize a legal constitutional election system for the judges? Now there's 2 different types of judges. There's judges who have authority in their court singularly. District judges do a trial. There's not a group of 3. There's not a panel. Appellate courts have panels.
Just for the benefit of our viewers, Paul, you're talking now about state court elected judges and appellate court judges on the state level.
Right, and we have 3 levels. We have district court judges who each govern the conduct of activity in their court themselves. If you don't like what a district judge does, you appeal to our intermediate appellate court called the Circuit Court of Appeal. All right, and then if you don't like that result, you go to the Louisiana Supreme Court. We've got 3 tiers. The first tier is a single acting state official with absolute unmodified discretion to apply the law. That's no different than the governor. That's different than a legislator who is elected by a group of voters that then goes and participates in our governing methods as a member of a larger group that requires a majority, let's say in the House and the Senate of Louisiana. The district judge is clearly the most independent state official, and the idea that we're going to allocate state officials by the proportion of racial population is odious, is the word that the Supreme Court said. If I can, I'll read it quickly. Here's the crux of where the Supreme Court is going to create a colorblind methodology under the 14th Amendment. This is what Alito's opinion says. Meaning the Supreme Court's acceptance of race-based state action has been rare for a reason. Distinctions between citizens solely because of their ancestry are by their very nature odious to a free people whose institutions are founded upon the doctrine of equality. And in redistricting, where the state assumes that a group of voters' race, assumes from their race that they think alike, share the same political interests, and will prefer the same candidates at the poll, is engaged in racial stereotyping at odds with equal protection mandates. This stuff we cannot stand.
Yeah.
And so
yeah, I love that. I love that, Paul.
That quote, and then if you go to the quote, I don't need to read it, where Alito says, as it relates to our history, it is abysmal, but the issue is not whether it was abysmal. The question is what's going on in today's political and electoral environment.
Yeah.
And we simply have an unconstitutional system that has to be changed.
And under Callais and RUCO, Paul, the state of Louisiana, particularly the legislature, has every authority and every right, with no federal restriction, to rectify this, to make this right.
That's exactly right. And even more so, and the reason I also bring it up is the state's answer to reopening Clark. I've had one governor and one attorney general surrender in the 90s. Okay. They have about 25 more days left to answer the attempt in the Clark case to reopen that 40-year-old case and to try to use its findings from 40 years ago to justify racial subdistricts today. And if they're successful, if our governor or our attorney general tolerate the idea that discrimination 40 years ago allows for an otherwise unconstitutional remedy today, they'll lose at the U.S. Supreme Court again, just like they did in Callais.
Yeah.
Because they are simply ignoring the Supreme Court.
And Paul, there's a great question in the chat that I'll read to you. And if I didn't know better, I would think that it was you putting the question in the chat because the gentleman's name is Paul. So he's over here agreeing with you, saying you're making great points. So I'm like, Paul, you're going to have to change your name in the chat.
Yeah.
No.
He may be from Natchitoches.
He says, if the judge is elected from sub-districts but hear cases from the whole district, how do the citizens hold the judge accountable? Funny how certain judges get the big cases and you can bet how they will rule depending on the politics of the case. The good old boys like the current system. It protects them from us.
Look, he's right. The answer is that what we've generated by the racial subdistricts is a system that feeds on and supports racial polarization. What I'm proposing is it's a election system that will give us more elections of our district judges more often. They'll have to run, and second, that it's called a group plurality. But what it does is everybody runs in the whole district, and the plurality system favors the judge who can get crossover vote from both sides. Because he'll always get beat by one of the alternative candidates that get more crossover vote from him. All things being equal, it's a system that helps neutralize or minimize the determinative strength of racial polarized voting. And so we've got a viable constitutional system. The question is, can we get it and not hide behind a 40-year decision that the Supreme Court will throw out? Because if you go to Alito's comment, what's happened yesteryears doesn't determine what's happening today. It's just straight up, no, we need to start over and decide where we are today, and we need a constitutional system.
Yeah.
Paul, what is the essential argument that these three black judges are making? The effort to preserve their own racial subdistricts. Is that really about protecting the Voting Rights Act, or is this really just an act of judicial self-preservation?
Well, both, but it's to preserve the erroneous application of the Voting Rights Act from 40 years ago. What they've argued is that the court, through a consent decree, you know something's wrong when the good old boys are entering into consent decrees. If there's
Yeah.
one thing the good old boys like, it's racial districting. Incumbents pick incumbents by race. And what they did is they surrendered it. And so what they have is it turned into a judge's order that said that these particular judicial districts, and they're all the big ones, there's Shreveport, Bossier, there's Monroe, there's Alec, there's Lake Charles, Lafayette, Baton Rouge, the one just outside Baton Rouge, New Orleans, St. Tammany. You go to any of the major districts, and they said these districts will have certain people denied the right to vote and certain people given the right to vote. And the state just agreed to it. But what they also did is they even agreed to do racial sub-districts in judicial districts that were not found to be discriminatory. They agreed to discriminate anyway. The 23rd Judicial District, I did a case there, and it's one of my losers. The judge said, even though the federal government mandated racial sub-districts or they wouldn't pre-clear a new judgeship, they agreed to do racial districts in a district that there has been no Voting Rights Act finding of discrimination. It is an attempt to try to, in quotes, preserve, and this is an interesting question. How is the federal court going to deal with yesterday's Voting Rights Act orders that appear to be clearly wrong under Callais? And so where we are is this, I'm sorry, the simple answer is that what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to simply say the Supreme Court has altered the analysis, and that analysis will not carry forward. And if you want to bring a Voting Rights Act claim today, you're going to have to bring it today under existing law. It's simple. The federal court in the Middle District should simply refuse to reopen the case. And now we can go to the legislature, enact an appropriate remedy, and let it be judged by its own current merits.
Yeah.
So what is your proposed path forward then, Paul? Because I know that if you have been thinking about a problem, you've been thinking about a solution.
The solution to me is what I call a grouped plurality vote. And what you do is you create, instead of the best way to make sure that racial polarized voting is preserved and relied upon, and I don't want that. I want a structure that neutralizes racial differences and maximizes merit differences. And what you do is you create groups of judges, say 4 of them, they all have 6-year terms. You run a group of them every 2 years, not the same guys, but if I've got 12 in Washita, I run 4 in 2026, 4 in 2028, and 4 in 2030, and everybody gets their 6-year term. But what we have is, instead of you running against one judge, which is the way it was done before Clark, what happens then is everybody else gets a free pass. By doing it as a group, you have to run, and let's say there's 4 in your, because we happen to have 12, and I've got 3 2-year terms, so that makes it where I can have everybody elected every 6 years. But when your group of 4 comes up, if those 4 incumbents qualify, that's fine. When a fifth candidate comes up, he goes in the group. And now the voters get 4 votes. And they can pick any 4 they want. They can't take all 4 votes and give it to one person, but you can pick your 4 candidates. So what you run into is a new candidate doesn't have to run against one judge. You don't get a head-on. The answer is everybody runs on their own record, not against each other. And so if you're a black candidate and you get a lot of black vote, if you get some white crossover, you'll win.
Yeah.
If you're a white candidate that gets the white vote and you get some black crossover, you win. But who's winning is the one who can appeal to and garner multiracial, multi-group communities. Look, in Monroe, we have a historic dividing line that we call West Monroe and Monroe. And we don't like each other, okay? I mean, not really, but I mean, it's sort of at least at a football level. But what happens is, if you're a Monroe judge, if you're a Monroe lawyer and you want to run, you got to go make friends and get votes on West Monroe. And so that's all we're saying is we want a system that encourages crossover campaigning and crossover voting to be the determinative factor. And we've got it, and I mean, I've got it designed. I've got the maps in my folder. You're exactly right. I don't. If we've got a constitutional problem, we need a constitutional remedy, and the group plurality elections will help us maintain good judges, black and white, and be able to sort out the bad judges, black and white. And so,
yes. And Paul, and one of the things that I love about this proposal is the fact that it will force judicial candidates to really look at the issues that affect the community as a whole in order to appeal to the common interest, instead of simply relying on the fact that I'm running in a district that favors my race. It seems to be not only an unconstitutional way, but a rather lazy way of doing things. I think that what you're saying here will encourage real debate on the real issues that affect everyone, regardless of race.
That's right. And this system, quite frankly, does not require a runoff. And so for the judges campaigning, it's actually cheaper.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's a which is another benefit to a grouped plurality. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping to get the word out that don't wait on an overly aggressive federal court to hand a surrender system that we know we wouldn't enact ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's get the legislature to grind the sausage, and let's get us a plurality group system that will move us constitutionally forward.
Yeah. One of the things, Paul, that you've proposed that I find very intriguing is 12-year term limits for judges. Why do you think that is a good thing? Will that have a positive effect on the judiciary overall?
Well, I think term limits, now I will say this. If I'm elected for a district judgeship and I get 6 years, 12 was 2 terms to either move up to the next level, and then you would get another term limit at the higher level. But my thought has been, since I wrote that, is maybe 15 is better for one reason. If a judge resigns early and I get elected, in the last half of his his term, I would serve 3 and then have to immediately go to an election. So I gave a little possibility for the judge that gets elected to a partial term, and would say make it 15, because 15 won't give you the right to go to 18, but it would give you the right that if you got elected in the last couple of years of a retiring judge's term, then it would give you the ability to stay 2 full terms, and then you're
Right.
up or you're
Yes.
out. And
Instead of
I
having,
think
instead of being theoretically in a position where you'd have to quit after year 3 of your last term,
of your second term.
of your second term, exactly. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
it's just to get, and it's to encourage that we get judgeship elections as a group together. And that's really, to me, the beneficial. And what it also means is I'm not going to get as many young, inexperienced lawyers with specialized training. They've worked in a DA's office. They've worked in a personal injury office. Those kind of lawyers that are good lawyers, they're good lawyers, they're smart lawyers, but they're specialized. They don't have a broad base. If the young lawyer gets elected without term limits, or without term limits, which is what we have today, they've got a real reason to keep getting reelected. They've turned their career into a judicial career, not a lawyer's career. And what happens is you become vested in those who can keep you on the bench inside the system. That's how trial lawyers have influence. That's how big businesses have influence. That's how particular racial groups have big influence, because that lawyer elected young has nowhere else to go. But with the term limit, what will happen is the younger lawyer won't choose to be a judge so soon. And so I'll get more knowledgeable, more independent judge candidates simply because you can come in, but you either have to come in and move up, or you'll move out back to private practice. And that's hard to do when you come in at 30, you leave at 42, and you're otherwise in the middle of your legal years. I wouldn't choose that until I'm 40 or 45, so that my 12 years gets me near 60.
Right.
And
right.
so I think it has the effect of not letting judicial fiefdoms occur where you'll have to be a judge for part of your career, but you won't be able to be a judge for your entire career. I also think it means we'll get more non-judge candidates running for appellate levels. Because right now, if you're not a district judge, they know when an appellate level is going to come open. If we do the same similar grouping of our appellate judges, we will get more lawyers into the appellate level, which I believe is better, because they'll be more experienced and have a broader background. And most important to the voter, the older the judge, the older the candidate is, the better we know him or her. We know them for their work, and it won't matter what they say. We'll know what they've done. And so, in that sense, I think it gives us, as a voting population, a better chance to elect independent, fair, competent judges.
Yeah. And Paul,
Yeah.
Paul
Go
in the
ahead,
chat
Danielle,
here
sorry.
is saying that sitting district judges rarely, if ever, have someone run against them. A practicing attorney is committing suicide by running against the judge that will be holding his or her future in their hand. And I agree. And I think that grouped electoral process is so excellent, because if someone raises their hand and says, I want to run, you're not running head to head against anybody. You're saying, I want to be part of this process. And so it kind of has a different effect. It also should get some of the ugliness out of campaigns.
Right. It does you no good to personalize the judicial campaign. The answer is, where am I on the right of fathers and mothers to have custody of their children? Where am I on the need for strict criminal application against violent juveniles? those are judicial issues that we would be addressing, not who's your opponent's mother
Right.
or who's your opponent's law firm. Those kind of things, it would depersonalize it and make
Yeah.
it more judicial importance. Where are you on tort reform? How do you apply the law as you see it? And so I absolutely think this is a better way to make the running for judge not an issue. And so because it will threaten you if you run against a judge, the people who have existing practices, they've already built that practice. If they run for judge, they've just hurt their established practice. Right now, the young people run because they don't have a practice to lose. They've got some experience somewhere, and they're just trying to jump in line, in the judicial line, as a judicial career. And I think that longevity becomes a bigger issue than fidelity to the law.
Very much so, and by requiring term limits, 12 or 15-year term limits, they will be discouraged from running before they are of a certain age and experience. And so I think that is a very good proposal. How does this, Paul, dovetail? I've talked with a number of lawyers who lament the fact that so many of these young lawyers, they run for the bench, the judicial bench, before they really can even find the bathroom inside of a courtroom. They've never tried a case. They've never argued a motion. They really do not understand how the legal practice works. If the proposal that we've been talking about here regarding term limits for judges, if that becomes the law, would that obviate the need to have a specific requirement, say that a lawyer be practicing for 10 years or so at least before they run for judge and have a certain number of years of experience in the practice? Would that help to resolve that issue?
Well, the issue exists constitutionally right now. All right, so but it's very limited. It's like 8 years or 5 years of practice. This will be a better
Solution.
Structural guarantee that what we will get will be enough experienced lawyers that the inexperienced young lawyer won't have as good an opportunity to get elected to start with, so he'll never be a candidate early. It works the same way, but it works because the system favors the more experienced lawyer.
Yes. And it requires them to run, and it requires them to make the decision based upon their own professional self-interest.
That's right.
Because they don't want to be they don't want to go and serve as a judge for 12 or 15 years at the age of 30 and then have to return and rebuild a law practice.
And maybe not, well, often what you find are these are lawyers who have salary type jobs with a DA or with legal aid, and there's nothing wrong with it, but what you find is they're specialized lawyers. They've normally had trials. They've normally handled cases in the courts. The problem is they've only done divorce law and domestic and custody fights or community property fights, or they've done criminal prosecutions. But what they have done tells us what they've not done. And what we get with a older, more diversified lawyer would be a judge with much more knowledge of the issues and the applications within those several different categories. One other thing that I put in my proposal is I think what our experience teaches us that the creation of specialty judges is a mistake. And the reason why is and what specialty judges do we have? You may have a judge at a district court level that's only handling juvenile. You may have a drug court. You may have a criminal district court that handles no civil. You may have a civil district court that handles no criminal. In Washita, our judges handle all that. I believe that what we have found is when you create specialty courts, the special interest inside those particular subject matter, like the DA doesn't give a twit about the civil district judge, cares about the criminal district judge. The tort lawyers don't care about the criminal judge. And so what you end up with is the subgroup of who really participates in the election gets sliced into pieces, smaller and smaller pieces. And what do you end up with? You end up with easier to influence the election for your own benefit and not the benefit of the broad voting community.
Yes, because
The
of the very,
special
very
interest-
narrow special interests that occur.
That's right.
What you described, Paul, your first scenario was exactly what exists in East Baton Rouge Parish, where there's a specialty court for family law. Criminal judges do only criminal law, and civil judges do only civil law. That's exactly what exists in East Baton Rouge Parish right now.
And it creates individual fiefdoms and special interests who have an exaggerated benefit and focus only on their judge. And that's what's bad. Now we're not getting, with that setup, they can be overwhelmed by the non-interest of the rest of the community.
Yeah. I have one final question for you, and then whatever Danielle wants to add. One of the things that you mentioned as a proposal, and by the way, I know the things that you are suggesting that I've seen obviously are subject to flexibility, and obviously you're open to different angles and advice on it. But one of the suggestions that you make is that a district court judge who's reversed 3 or more times on appeal would become ineligible to remain.
Become disqualified. It would
Yeah.
be like he resigned.
It would be like he resigned. Would there be any narrowing of that criteria? Because first of all, appellate courts are not perfect either, Paul. Sometimes they can be corrupt. Sometimes they can be subject to to political influence. So my question is would it be just a hard and fast automatic rule that in a 12 or 15-year term, if a district state court judge gets reversed on appeal 3 or more times, automatically they're gone?
My proposal is yes, and here's why. My job as a judge is to exercise my discretion that the law gives me to find the facts and then apply the law that exists today. The Supreme Court and the appellate courts ultimately are the arbiters, the decision making on how the law should be applied. My answer is that my job as a district judge is not to make law, try to make new law. My job is to apply the law that exists. Judges write opinions all the time that say, I believe this Supreme Court holding requires that the law requires me to do A. I would believe that a different interpretation would result in B. But because of this precedent of Smith versus Jones, given to me by the Louisiana Supreme Court, I hereby rule that this case is under Smith v. Jones. Now, one exception that I would want on any of the reversals is if the underlying the underlying jurisprudence that the district judge applied, if the Supreme Court or the appellate court overrules it, I'm not penalized because I followed a case that was then overruled. But my job as a judge is not to make that law. My job at a district court level is to follow the law. And I'm going to say this, the reason this judicial excellence program means so much to me is if you look at President Trump. What's happening to President Trump in the federal system, this is federal, not state, is that the district judges don't care that they're being overruled. They're they're politically ruling in favor of their own political choices. And in a year or 18 months, they get overruled and there's no penalty. What I want is consistently applying the law. If I don't like the law, then I need to go see my Supreme Court justices and I need to elect better Supreme Court justices, or I need to get the law changed to get us a better societal result. But that's the reason I can debate whether 3 is enough or 2 or too big or too little. But I don't think these judges right now get reversed 3 times in 10 years.
Well, I think you're right, but I think there probably are some there are some actually who do, Paul. And if you would apply this rule to state level judges, what would you do with an appellate judge or an appellate panel that was overturned by the Louisiana Supreme Court 3 or more times? What happens to them?
I have not. You talk about flexibility. That's one of those areas where I don't know how. The fact that I can't apply this standard to the intermediate appellate level doesn't mean that it's not a good system at the single acting district judge level who is responsible for what he does.
Yeah. I certainly think that it would require, it really would motivate state district judges to be very conscientious in their rulings and apply the law as written more objectively and not to act in a political way. I guess the only point that I would make on this, Paul, is that appellate courts and appellate judges, and even frankly the Louisiana Supreme Court, can also act politically, can also act outside the boundaries of the rule of law. There is no level of judicial activity in our state that's impervious to political influence or political corruption. And so that's why I guess I would say perhaps there should be some maybe a bit narrower criteria here rather than simply an automatic rule. But in principle, I absolutely understand what you're saying here. And I think that, the political influence that goes in to the decision making on the state, on the district court level, the frontline level, I think is just odious in our state right now. So, in principle, I'm very impressed with the proposed solution. I just would want to have some discussions about perhaps how to narrow that criteria just a bit and not make it absolutely automatic.
Maybe one answer to what you brought up is there is an additional part of the proposal that would increase the ability of the parties at a district court level to bypass the circuit level and go directly to the Supreme Court on their appeal or supervisory writ, is what it would be, so that it goes to the Supreme Court and you take an issue directly to the Supreme Court, and now you'll get a district judge that knows he can't rely on the mishmash at his circuit court appellate level and what panel does he draw, blah, blah, blah. He knows I can take him directly to the Supreme Court, Louisiana Supreme Court, and get a ruling on a sub-issue less than a full judgment. And what it does, it helps focus the mind. And what we really want is this system. If I've got a district judge who is regularly getting reversed, he needs to be gone. His job is to apply the law as the law exists by the legislature and as applied and interpreted by the appellate judges above him. And my answer is I'll deal with how I control through my vote, how I control my Supreme Court, because I don't believe in appointing judges. So even if voting in democracy and electing a Supreme Court member isn't perfect. If I get a majority in the Supreme Court willing to be disciplined and to better direct the district judges who know 3 strikes and you're out, then I get judges that will say, I will apply it as the Supreme Court would direct me. I have risk if I choose to rule in my own way. And I'll give you a perfect example. In the federal court, 2 federal district judges ruled that Trump could not impose his restrictions on through the post office regulations on mail-in ballots. One of them got to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court reversed and said, no, that executive order's proper. Do you know what happened in the other case? The other judge said, wait, based upon the new holding by the Supreme Court, they reversed themselves. Well, that's what will happen if we get a more actively involved Supreme Court instructions. We will get a disciplined, more consistent application of the law throughout our state. We won't have little parishes where you go to get a deal from a local judge for a local candidate. We're going to get some discipline throughout the state, and it's not perfect, but I think judicial excellence, where if you get reversed too many times, you are unqualified to retain your judgeship.
Yeah.
And I think
Really the common theme, Paul, among your proposals, I think, is that is because the reform it will be motivated out of self-preservation, largely, is what this comes down to, because people are interested in preserving their own careers. And I think that by tying these proposals to the impetus of self-preservation, I think is very, very smart.
Well, self-preservation and consistency in the law join one another instead of it being separate right now.
Yeah.
If you
Right.
take many of these judges, they know they are ruling wrong. Not many. Some of them know they're ruling wrong. They know it's likely they're going to get reversed, but they know the voters that elect them today will like what they did, even if they get reversed. The point needs to be that the local judge, it must be disciplined to and bound by the judicial system and not their own preference once they're elected. Yeah. At this point,
Yes.
The Supreme Court, as they say, isn't supreme because it's always right. It's right because it's supreme.
Right, yes. And tying judicial excellence to the impetus of self-preservation really is the underlying
They're
tenet
no
of most
longer
of the
in
code.
conflict.
Yes, no longer in conflict.
things
Danielle, any
that-
last words for Paul?
Yeah,
Yeah,
just a couple things in the
Go
chat
ahead.
that I want to make sure get in. Power Giant 60 says, I'm still in a racially gerrymandered district. He's over there on Rumble. Says District 2 is racially gerrymandered. And then Paul over here in the Facebook chat says, we need more Paul Hurds and Ed Tarpley's running the courts. I'll say amen to that.
Thank you.
Amen to that.
As it relates to District 2 in Congress, the Callais plaintiffs have procedurally been ordered by the court. I think it's to let this election occur, and then by mid to early December, after the November elections under these districts, that the Callais plaintiffs will have to identify whether or not they think District 2 is a racial gerrymander. And we're talking about Congress now.
Yeah.
That will come back to the existing district court, 3-judge panel, through pleadings that'll be handed in December. That issue's not over.
Is it still your position, Paul, that District 2 is a racial gerrymander?
I've got clients that I have no clients in the judicial fight. I'm still co-counsel with my 12 wonderful Callais plaintiffs, and we'll make our position known in December.
Fair
And look,
enough.
we'll be fair. We're going to have a complete set of election results that'll come out of these new districts that'll come out in November. And then we'll be able to know better how they perform today. As Justice Alito said, how are they performing today?
Briefly, how does this lawsuit filed by the 3 minority judges in East Baton Rouge Parish, in your view, how does that end?
If it's done right, the district judge will end it and not reopen it. If they can still file their own lawsuit, but they won't be able to drag in the old Clark issues. And then if they reopen it, unless my attorney general or my governor surrenders, it will be appealed to the Fifth Circuit. And I think the Fifth Circuit under Callais will keep Clark closed. I mean, that would be, as a commentator, that's where I would be to say Callais says that this does not govern 40 years later.
Yes.
This
And
is a
maybe
great
we
test.
finally put Clark to rest. And
Yeah,
maybe
well-
we finally put Clark to rest.
Well, to me, this is a great test of where they actually stood on Callais, right? Are you going to stand where you originally stood, or are you going to stand where you say you stood?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
this won't be the only time it occurs, but this is the first time this has occurred. But this is going to occur across all the courts, all the states that were subject to Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which is most of the South and many of the jurisdictions in the North. And so
Yeah.
this is a way to try to put Callais off and hold on to race-based remedies that under Callais I don't think stand. And so anyway,
The one and only Paul Hurd, thank
thank you
you
for
as
your time,
always
and
for
I do
joining us
appreciate
today.
everybody's comments. And we need a remedy, and we need to create a system that favors crossover community votes, and that is broad enough that everyone has an interest, because we're all going to the same judge. Let's all elect us a good, independent, knowledgeable, professional lawyer to be our judge for everyone.
Yeah.
Amen to that. Thank
Yeah.
you for joining us today, Paul, as always, sir.
Thanks for your time.
Yes, and just a reminder, I put a link to Paul's latest Substack article in the chat, so please go there. Please also subscribe to the State of Freedom's Substack. We're just Freedom State US on Substack.
That's
All right.
absolutely right. There's an article there about this subject, and there'll be a follow-up article in a week or so on the other issues that Chris and Danielle have raised to help build a foundation for a new constitutionalized judiciary.
Awesome.
We're going to have you on very soon, Paul, to talk more about the 2 constitutional amendments to rectify the current legislative dysfunction. A conversation for another day, but
sir.
I am blown away and impressed and motivated by those amendments. So we'll talk about those perhaps next time.
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to do so.
Thank you, Paul. We'll talk to you soon.
Go freedom.
Go Freedom. Chris, I love talking to Paul because he is always bringing creative solutions that really get at the core problems that our state is facing. And it's not political catering. You know, that's one of the things that really strikes me. And what's got me scratching my head here is that I think the person in the chat who says that they're still in a racially gerrymandered district may be Bert Callais. So the namesake of the Callais case, Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, does he live in District 2? Is he still in a racially gerrymandered district after all of this? After going all the way to the Supreme Court? It's the district that they chose to keep racially gerrymandered is Callais' district?
Well, I can tell you right now that if it is Bert Callais, one of the hesitations that Bert has to run for state rep is precisely because I believe the way that legislative district is drawn, which is substantial majority minority, and he's hesitant about whether or not he could win the way that district is currently configured. So I don't know if you're talking about Bert Callais, but I do believe that legislative district, the one that he's in,
The
is
congressional district?
well. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know about the congressional district, but I do know on the state level with regard to the state legislative district there.
Let's look at the map
That
real quick. Would he be in the Yeah, he is this what district is in green, Chris? Can you see it?
I let's see here.
Because EBR is yellow and then
Six.
West Baton Rouge is green. So okay, that's 6.
The district in green is 6,
Okay, and
and
2 is yellow.
right, exactly. 2 is yellow. It looks like well, West Baton Rouge is in green. That's where Bert is in
Right.
West Baton Rouge. So that is part. At least most of it is part of the sixth district. It
Okay.
looks like.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll have to ask him if
Yeah, we'll have to ask him about
it,
that.
it
But
might be another gentleman. There are 2 people I thought might have that handle. So anyway, it
yeah,
might not
they
be
have that
Bert,
handle.
but anyway, I thought that would be absolutely astonishing that after all that, Bert would still be in a racially gerrymandered congressional district.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I noticed that Paul. My suspicion, quite frankly, Danielle, is that Paul Hurd does have real concerns about District Two
Yeah.
right now on the federal level. He demurred a little bit on the answer, but I think I think if there's anybody who is in a position to be able to propose these types of reforms that we talked about today, it's Paul Hurd. There's just
Yeah.
no one who's any more qualified, and I have such great respect for his acumen, and I'm so excited about working with him to bring about some of these reforms. And I was very happy to hear what he believes probably and hopefully will be the outcome of this lawsuit filed by these judges over here in Baton Rouge who are essentially trying to preserve these racial subdistricts for their own political preservation, their own career preservation. So hopefully that will come out well. The other point that I wanted to bring up is that under Rucco and Callais now, Danielle, nobody in our legislature is going to be able to argue that there is any federal impediment, any federal order that's mandating them to do one thing or another. That was the chorus when SB 8 was passed, creating the flagrantly gerrymandered racial district for Cleo Fields. We didn't have any other choice. We were being ordered by a federal court essentially to do this, which wasn't true, but
Right.
they don't even have a facially plausible argument at this point why they should not go in and clean up these racially drawn judicial subdistricts in Louisiana. They have to do it, as Paul said, and they need to do it quickly in 2027.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. I hope to see Paul go the full distance on this districting issue so that we can. I think if we can clean up our districts and clean up our elections, we have gone a long, long way. That would be a huge, giant steps forward in terms of reforming our state.
Absolutely, no question about it.
Yeah. All right, Chris. Well, I got a couple of announcements. If you don't have anything else on this.
I'm good.
All right. Well, we've got some great stuff on tap here next week. And if you're in the Warrior Circle, you will find out first what topics we're covering and what guests are coming on. That's one of the perks of membership. You get to find out first. If you are not, you can still show up here next week and be delighted. We're so happy to have you regardless. But if you want to join the Warrior Circle and be counted among the Warriors, do that for us. We'd love to be having you in the mix and supporting this show so we can keep doing the work that we're doing here. You can just do that at let's see here, where is it? join.freedomstate.us. Here it is. Join.freedomstate.us. We'd love for you to do that. And of course, support LITIGATION, because LITIGATION is the hammer and the velvet glove with which some of these big issues are going to get handled in the legislature. Judicial districting sounds like it may be on tap. There's some other legislation that, Chris, you and I have talked about. We've talked about here with Paul before, that some proposed constitutional amendments that would really change the balance of power in this state going forward. Some tremendous ideas, as always, brought forward by Paul. So those are some of the things that LITIGATION will be working on. Not the only things. Lord knows that with the state of the world as it is, flock cameras are a big issue. AI data centers, NDAs, eminent domain, the list goes on and on. So you will want to support LITIGATION at litig.org to make sure that the fighter in the ring can keep on fighting for you.
Big fights, Danielle, big fights coming up, directly impacting freedom and liberty and the citizens of Louisiana. And that fight is really only going to come from LITIGATION and also from the state of freedom. So invest in the state of freedom, invest in LITIGATION, and allow us to continue to be your portal of truth. I loved what Craig said yesterday, who chatted in yesterday on Warrior Wednesday, that we are the only venue where he feels like he can go to get the uncensored truth about what is really happening in Louisiana politics and Louisiana government. I deeply appreciate that compliment, and I've noticed that increasing numbers of Louisiana citizens are coming to the same conclusion. So God bless the state of freedom, Danielle, and God bless you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and likewise. And just one final announcement, Chris, the Storm Summit is coming up in a few short weeks, and Chris and I will be there covering the event live, and we'd love to see you there as well if you can make it. So great lineup, September 10th through 13th, and if you are interested in tickets, you can get them at stormsummit.us. I've heard you can get $100 off with a promo code Bannon. We're going to have to get our own promo code. I don't know how Steve Bannon got his own promo code, but we didn't. I mean,
if anybody can do it, Danielle, you can. You can get the promo code.
I'll just use Bannon's for now. It's fine. It's not like I don't think Bannon's getting a kickback for it. So take the Bannon and get your $100 off.
There you go.
All right. Okay, Chris. Well, that's all for today. I guess we'll be back here on Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Can't wait to see you all. Please, I'm very happy to see that the chat's working and it looks like we were live on all platforms today. So
awesome.
That's a great development.
Last point, Danielle, I want everybody to make sure they keep sharing, keep subscribing, keep following LITIGATION and the State of Freedom on our social media platforms, on Facebook, on X, because that is a great portal of information as well that comes from both of our organizations. So it's not only on the State of Freedom when you can see us, but even when we're not on, please check regularly and share our posts and subscribe and follow us on our social media platforms. Knowledge is power, Danielle, and that is one of the many mechanisms of getting knowledge disseminated broadly to the citizens of Louisiana.
You're right. You're absolutely right. All right, Chris. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Cabo Fuego, it's just unbelievable. Whether it's the flame-grilled carne asada or a signature mango margarita. I had one of those too. They're serving up a literal feast of freedom at Cabo Fuego. It's just extraordinary. I love the owners, Andres and Jose. They run such a great restaurant. The service is extraordinary. The atmosphere is great. So if you're in Pineville and the Alexandria area or passing through, or if you live there, go to Cabo Fuego and tell them the State of Freedom sent you. Blanco Brothers has been in business in Louisiana for about 30 years now. I have personal experience with this company, and I know others who have as well. If you have a business or a home and you've got roofing, gutter, sheet metal issues at all, one number you need to know, and that's Blanco Brothers Construction. He will treat you right financially, and he will take very good care of you with regard to the quality of the service that he provides. I cannot recommend Blanco Brothers Construction more highly enough. Memorize the number 225-226-4222. Blanco Brothers Construction, the very best in the business.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Any follow-up actions, resources, and links to our sponsors will be in the show notes. All calls to action can be taken at lacag.org. That's LACAG.org.
To learn more about our work, become a monthly subscriber, supporter, or advertiser at freedomstate.us. The State of Freedom, the #1